Chosen one, pause for a moment and listen carefully. Do not scroll past this message, because what you are about to hear is not something random, and it is not something that arrived by coincidence. The fact that you are seeing these words right now means something has already begun to move in your life. The shift you have been sensing lately, the quiet restlessness in your spirit, the strange feeling that something is about to change. It is not imagination. It is confirmation. You may have been expecting a sign to arrive someday in the future, something obvious, something dramatic that would tell you your breakthrough was finally coming. But the truth is different from what you expected. The surprise you thought was still ahead of you is already in motion. It has already started unfolding behind the scenes, quietly and steadily, while you were focused on surviving the ordinary struggles of daily life. And that is why this message is urgent. Before noon today, something small but significant may cross your path. It might look ordinary at first glance, a conversation, a message, a decision, or even a sudden realization that seems simple on the surface. But if you overlook it, if you rush past it without paying attention, you could miss the very confirmation you have been praying for. You have been asking for clarity for a long time. You have asked for direction, for evidence that your efforts were not wasted, that your patience was not meaningless. There were nights when you questioned whether anything was really changing at all. You wondered if your prayers were floating into silence. But listen carefully. Nothing you have endured has been wasted. Every moment of uncertainty, every quiet tear, every time you chose to keep moving forward, even when it felt pointless, those moments were building something invisible. And now that invisible work is beginning to show signs on the surface. Chosen one, you need to understand something important. When a real shift begins, it rarely announces itself loudly. It rarely arrives with fireworks or dramatic declarations. Instead, it begins subtly. Doors start unlocking quietly. Conversations begin to align in strange ways. Opportunities appear disguised as ordinary moments, and the only way to recognize them is through awareness. Right now, you are entering a period where awareness will matter more than speed. Many people around you are moving quickly, rushing through their routines, chasing distractions and noise. But your path is different in this moment. Your path requires you to slow down, just enough to notice what others ignore. You may already feel that something is different. Perhaps recently you sensed a strange calm after a long period of pressure. Perhaps you noticed certain people stepping back from your life without conflict. Perhaps you felt new ideas appearing in your mind unexpectedly. These are not random changes. They are adjustments happening around you, so that what has already been set in motion can reach you without resistance. There are people who think blessings only arrive when everything looks perfect. They believe success appears when life finally becomes easy. But the truth is often the opposite. Real change often begins while everything still looks ordinary, sometimes even difficult. You may still feel tired. You may still be carrying responsibilities that weigh heavily on your shoulders. You may still be dealing with situations that seem unresolved. But something important is already moving. Chosen one, you are not waiting for your moment anymore. Your moment has quietly begun. This is why you must pay attention before noon today. There may be a message you almost ignore. There may be a thought you almost dismiss. There may be an opportunity that appears small, but carries a much larger meaning. And if you recognize it, everything begins to accelerate. Many people miss their turning points not because they are unlucky, but because they expect transformation to look dramatic. They imagine that change must appear with loud announcements, perfect timing, and clear explanations. But destiny often arrives disguised as a simple decision. For you, the movement has already begun because of the choices you made when no one was watching. The moments when you chose integrity over convenience. The times when you walked away from something that did not feel right even though it would have been easier to stay. Those decisions created momentum. Momentum is powerful. Once it begins, it pulls circumstances together in ways that seem almost impossible to predict. You may notice this momentum in small ways first. Conversations will start connecting dots you never noticed before. Information will appear that answers questions you have been carrying for months.
People may suddenly approach you with unexpected opportunities or insights, and when that happens, you might feel a strange sense of familiarity, as if you somehow knew it was coming. That feeling is not coincidence. It is the recognition of something that was already set in motion long before you saw the first visible sign. Chosen one, there is another reason you must remain attentive right now. Not everyone around you will recognize what is happening in your life. Some people will continue seeing you the way they always have. They will assume nothing has changed because the surface still looks familiar. But transformation often begins internally before it becomes visible externally. Your perspective has already shifted. You are thinking differently than you did months ago. You are questioning patterns you once accepted automatically. You are beginning to notice which environments strengthen you and which ones drain you. That awareness is the beginning of alignment.
Alignment means that the direction of your actions, your thoughts, and your opportunities are starting to move together instead of pulling you in opposite directions. And once alignment begins, progress becomes faster. But there is a small window where attention matters most. That window is opening now. Before noon today, take a moment to check the details you normally overlook. Look at the messages you receive carefully. Listen to conversations without rushing to respond. Notice the ideas that appear in your mind, even the ones that seem unusual at first. Because the surprise you have been waiting for is not arriving someday in the future. It is already moving. It is already unfolding. And the next sign might appear sooner than you expect. So pause for a moment. Breathe. Stay present long enough to notice what is happening around you today. Because by the time the afternoon arrives, you may realize something important. The thing you thought was still coming has already begun. Chosen one, there is something you need to understand about the way real change begins. Most people believe that when a blessing is approaching, life suddenly becomes obvious. They imagine that doors swing open loudly, that opportunities arrive with clear labels, and that the moment of transformation is impossible to miss. But the truth is more subtle. Real shifts often begin quietly while you are distracted by ordinary life. They start moving behind the scenes while you are busy solving daily problems, while you are dealing with responsibilities, while you are simply trying to get through the day. That is why so many people overlook the beginning of their own breakthrough. You see, destiny rarely interrupts loudly. It usually whispers first. And lately, the whispers around you have been getting stronger.
Perhaps you noticed certain plans falling apart unexpectedly. At the time, it may have felt frustrating. You may have wondered why something you worked toward suddenly stalled. But what looked like delay was actually adjustment. Sometimes things must move out of position so something better can move into place. You might also have noticed something else. Some people who used to dominate your attention are no longer as present in your life. Conversations that once felt constant have become quieter. Certain relationships feel different now, less intense, less controlling, less draining. That shift is not accidental. When something new begins moving toward you, space must be created for it. Not every connection, habit, or environment from your past can travel with you into the next stage of your life. And that is exactly what has been happening. Chosen one, there are moments in life when the universe begins reorganizing your surroundings long before you realize why. Pieces start shifting subtly. Some doors close quietly. Other doors open without explanation. If you are not paying attention, these changes can feel confusing. But when you step back and observe carefully, you begin to notice a pattern. The pattern is alignment. Alignment means that the right elements are slowly being positioned around you so that the opportunity already in motion can actually reach you. You may have prayed for clarity in the past. You may have asked for direction, for guidance, for confirmation that your path was not wasted effort. Those prayers did not disappear. They started a process, and that process is now unfolding. But here is something important to remember. When change begins, it often tests your attention before it reveals its full meaning. That is why today matters. Before noon, something small may appear that reflects the larger movement already happening in your life. It might not look dramatic. In fact, it might look so ordinary that many people would ignore it completely. But you are not like most people. You have already been through enough experiences to know that the smallest details sometimes carry the biggest signals. Think about your past for a moment. There were times when a single conversation changed the direction of your decisions. There were moments when one unexpected idea altered your entire perspective. There were days when a seemingly random encounter eventually became a turning point in your story. Those moments were not accidents. They were signals appearing at exactly the right time. And today may carry another signal like that. Chosen one, the reason the surprise is already in motion is because you reached a point where preparation met timing. Preparation does not always look impressive from the outside. Sometimes, preparation simply means surviving difficult seasons without giving up. It means continuing forward when nothing around you seems to confirm your efforts. It means choosing patience instead of reacting out of frustration. Those quiet choices build something powerful: readiness. Readiness is what allows opportunity to recognize you when it arrives. Many people want sudden transformation, but they are not prepared for it when it appears. They ask for change, but when change approaches, they hesitate because it disrupts their familiar patterns. You, however, have already been changing internally. Over the past months, your thinking has been shifting. You have been questioning habits you once accepted without thought. You have been becoming more aware of what truly matters to you. You may have even noticed that certain distractions no longer feel as appealing as they once did. That shift in focus is part of the preparation. It means you are beginning to recognize the difference between what temporarily entertains you and what genuinely moves your life forward. Chosen one. When that awareness develops, it creates momentum. Momentum does not always move quickly at first. Sometimes it begins like a slow current beneath the surface. You cannot see it clearly yet, but you can feel it pulling things into place. That current is moving now, and the reason you must remain attentive before noon is because early signals often appear just before momentum becomes visible. You might receive a message that reconnects you with an idea you abandoned months ago. You might notice an opportunity related to something you once considered impossible. You might even experience a sudden moment of clarity about a decision you have been postponing. Whatever form it takes, the signal will likely feel simple. But simplicity does not mean insignificance. Sometimes the most powerful changes begin with a quiet realization, a thought that suddenly feels undeniable. Chosen one, there is also another layer to this moment that many people do not realize. When something important begins moving in your life, your intuition often becomes stronger. You start sensing patterns before they fully appear. You notice subtle differences in the atmosphere around you. Have you felt that lately? Have you felt moments when you suddenly paused and wondered why something felt different, even though nothing obvious had changed yet? That sensation is not imagination. It is awareness sharpening. Your mind and your instincts are beginning to recognize shifts before your eyes can see them clearly. And that is exactly why this moment matters. The surprise you expected to arrive someday in the future has already entered the early stage of reality. It has already begun weaving itself into your timeline.
but early stages require attention.
Think of it like the first light of sunrise. When the sun begins rising, the sky does not instantly become bright. At first, there is only a faint glow at the horizon. Many people overlook it because the darkness still seems stronger. But those who are paying attention know what that glow means. It means the day has already begun. Chosen one, your sunrise has already started. You are still standing in the early glow, where things look familiar, but feel slightly different. And today may bring the moment when that glow becomes impossible to ignore. That is why you must check the details around you before noon. Not with anxiety, not with fear, but with calm awareness. Because when the signal appears, you will recognize it. And when you recognize it, you will understand something that many people miss for years. The opportunity you thought was still approaching was already on its way to you, long before you realized it.
Chosen one, there is another reason this moment matters more than it appears. You may have noticed that recently your life has felt slightly unusual, even if you cannot fully explain why. Certain days feel heavier than expected, while other moments feel strangely calm, almost as if something invisible is stabilizing the atmosphere around you. This contrast is not random. Whenever something meaningful begins moving toward a person's life, two forces often appear at the same time. One force pushes you forward, the other tries to distract you. The forward movement usually feels quiet. It shows itself through small opportunities, subtle clarity, and moments of unexpected confidence. The distractions, however, tend to be louder. They appear as sudden stress, unnecessary conflict, or situations designed to pull your focus away from what truly matters. Chosen one, the reason awareness is so important today is because distractions often increase just before an important shift becomes visible. You may notice people around you behaving unpredictably. Someone might say something that irritates you more than usual. A minor inconvenience might appear at the exact moment you were trying to concentrate. These interruptions can feel frustrating, but if you observe them carefully, you will realize something interesting. They often appear right before clarity arrives. Think about how many times in your life a breakthrough happened shortly after a confusing period. The tension you felt before those moments was not meaningless. It was pressure building before release. And pressure is often a sign that something is about to change. Chosen one, there is a pattern that many people fail to recognize. When something valuable begins moving toward your life, the environment around you often shifts in response.
Some individuals will suddenly become supportive. They will encourage your growth, sometimes without even realizing why they feel drawn to help you. Others may become distant or uncomfortable. They may sense that your direction is changing, even if you have not announced anything yet. This reaction is natural. Growth often rearranges the people around you. Some will naturally align with your movement forward. Others will drift away because they were connected to a previous version of you. Neither reaction is necessarily negative. It is simply part of the adjustment process. Chosen one. The reason the surprise you have been waiting for is already in motion is because your life has quietly reached a point of readiness. You did not arrive here overnight. You arrived through persistence. There were moments when continuing forward felt pointless. There were days when you wondered if the effort you were making would ever lead to anything meaningful.
But even during those uncertain periods, something inside you refused to completely give up. That inner persistence matters more than you realize. Persistence creates alignment over time. It keeps you moving long enough for circumstances to reorganize themselves around your determination. Many people stop just before momentum begins. They walk away from opportunities moments before the conditions would have shifted in their favor. They lose patience when progress feels slow. But you stayed long enough for the early movement to begin. And now, that movement is becoming stronger.
Chosen one. Before noon today, you may experience something that feels small but carries symbolic meaning. It could be a message that reconnects you with an idea you once set aside. It could be a conversation that suddenly makes sense of something confusing in your past. Sometimes, the sign appears as a sudden realization. You may find yourself thinking about a decision you have been avoiding, and for the first time, the answer becomes obvious. When that clarity arrives, it may feel almost too simple. But simplicity often indicates truth. The mind complicates things when it is uncertain. When clarity finally appears, it often arrives quietly and directly. Chosen one. There is also something else happening right now that deserves your attention. Your perspective is evolving. You are beginning to see patterns that once seemed invisible. You may notice how certain situations repeat themselves in your life until you respond differently. You may begin recognizing which environments support your growth and which ones drain your energy. This awareness is part of your preparation. Preparation does not only involve external circumstances, it also involves internal readiness. If the right opportunity appears, but your mindset is still focused on fear or doubt, you might hesitate long enough for the moment to pass. But when your mindset begins shifting toward confidence and awareness, opportunities become easier to recognize. That shift has already started happening within you. Chosen one, there is a reason you have felt a growing sense of urgency lately. Perhaps you noticed that you have become more selective with your time. Activities that once felt important now seem unnecessary. Conversations that used to hold your attention now feel repetitive. This is not boredom. It is refinement. Refinement means your focus is becoming sharper. You are beginning to distinguish between what moves your life forward and what simply fills time. When that shift occurs, the environment around you begins responding. Opportunities start appearing that match your new focus. Conversations begin connecting you with information you previously overlooked. Even small decisions start creating larger outcomes. This is how momentum develops. Momentum rarely arrives all at once. It begins with a series of small adjustments that slowly build into visible change. Chosen one, that process has already begun in your life. The reason today carries importance is because early signals often appear just before momentum becomes obvious. If you stay present and attentive, you may recognize something today that confirms what your intuition has been sensing for weeks. It might not be dramatic, but it will feel meaningful. And when you notice it, something inside you will respond immediately. You will feel a quiet certainty, a recognition that something has shifted. Chosen one, that feeling is not imagination. It is the moment when preparation finally meets movement. Many people search for signs outside themselves, expecting the world to announce their turning point. But often, the first confirmation appears internally. It arrives as calm confidence. It arrives as clarity about what step to take next. And once that clarity appears, everything begins accelerating. Because when you know the direction you must move, hesitation disappears. Action becomes natural. Opportunities become easier to recognize. And the surprise you thought was still waiting in the future suddenly becomes visible in the present. Chosen one, that is where you are standing right now. At the edge of a moment where something that began quietly is about to reveal itself more clearly. So before noon today, slow down just enough to notice the details around you. Observe what crosses your path. Listen carefully to the ideas that enter your mind. Because the signal you recognize today may be the confirmation that what you have been hoping for has already started unfolding. Chosen one, there is something about the moment you are living in right now that deserves deeper attention. When a real turning point begins approaching, life rarely pauses to make it obvious. Instead, it continues moving forward with its usual rhythm. People wake up, go to work, answer messages, handle responsibilities, and move through their routines as if nothing unusual is happening. But beneath that ordinary surface, invisible movements begin taking shape. This is the stage you are in now. The surprise you thought would someday appear dramatically is already unfolding in subtle ways. The pieces have started moving into position, even if you have not yet seen the final picture. Think about the past few weeks. Have you noticed small changes that seemed insignificant at first? Perhaps someone mentioned an idea that lingered in your mind longer than expected. Perhaps you discovered information that answered a question you had been carrying quietly. Perhaps an opportunity appeared briefly, and although you did not act on it immediately, it stayed in your thoughts afterward.
Those moments are not random. Often the first signals of change arrive as fragments, small pieces of information that do not make sense immediately, but begin forming a pattern over time. Chosen one, patterns reveal movement. When the same idea appears from multiple directions, when different conversations lead you toward the same realization, when unrelated situations start pointing to the same possibility, something important is happening. It means the environment around you is aligning. Alignment does not always look dramatic at first. Sometimes it simply looks like coincidence repeating itself. But coincidence repeated enough times becomes direction. Right now, direction is forming in your life. You may still feel uncertain about exactly where this direction will lead. That uncertainty is natural. Early stages of transformation often feel incomplete because you can only see a small portion of what is unfolding. Imagine standing at the beginning of a long road during early morning light. You can see the first part of the path clearly, but the distance ahead is still hidden in soft shadows. That does not mean the road does not exist. It simply means you have not reached the point where it becomes visible yet. Chosen one, you are standing in that early light right now. And the reason you must check carefully before noon is because signals often appear during the quiet moments when your attention is calm. You may notice something that reminds you of a goal you once abandoned. You may suddenly remember a skill or idea that once excited you but seemed unrealistic at the time. Sometimes the signal appears as an invitation, an unexpected opportunity to reconnect with something meaningful. When that happens, many people hesitate. They wonder if they are imagining things. They question whether the moment is actually important or just a temporary distraction. But there is a simple way to recognize when something deserves attention. Pay attention to the feeling that follows it. If the moment leaves you feeling anxious, pressured, or confused, it may simply be another distraction. But if the moment leaves you feeling calm, curious, or quietly energized, it may be a signal pointing toward your next step. Chosen one, your intuition has been developing stronger over time. You may not have noticed it at first, but you are beginning to sense the difference between noise and direction. Noise is loud but empty. It pulls your attention without giving you clarity. Direction is quieter. It may appear as a simple thought, a small opportunity, or a subtle realization. But when direction appears, it carries a sense of meaning. And meaning is what transforms ordinary moments into turning points. Chosen one, there is another reason the movement in your life has begun quietly. If change arrived all at once, it could overwhelm you. Imagine receiving every opportunity you have ever hoped for at the same time. Imagine being asked to make life-altering decisions without preparation. That kind of sudden pressure could create confusion instead of progress. But gradual movement allows you to adapt. It gives you time to notice patterns. It allows your confidence to grow as each step becomes clearer. That is exactly what is happening now. The surprise you thought was still approaching has already started developing in stages. The early stage is awareness. The next stage is recognition. And after recognition comes action. Chosen one, awareness has already begun in your life. You have started noticing subtle shifts in your thinking, your priorities, and your environment. Recognition may happen soon, perhaps today. Recognition is the moment when something clicks.
It is the moment when a pattern suddenly makes sense. You may look back at recent events and realize they were connected all along. Conversations, ideas, and opportunities that once seemed unrelated suddenly form a clear direction. When that moment arrives, the next step becomes easier. Action will no longer feel forced. It will feel natural. Chosen one. Many people spend years waiting for certainty before taking action. They believe they must understand every detail before moving forward. But life rarely reveals every detail in advance. Instead, it reveals enough for the next step. The next step may appear simple. It might involve responding to a message you almost ignored. It might involve revisiting a plan you once dismissed as unrealistic. It might even involve making a small decision that changes the direction of your attention. Small decisions can create large outcomes. History is filled with moments where one conversation, one introduction, or one unexpected idea changed everything that followed. Chosen one. That is why awareness today matters. Because the moment that feels ordinary now may later become the moment you recognize as the beginning of something significant. You may look back and realize that the shift started with a simple realization before noon on a seemingly normal day. And that realization may guide you towards something larger than you expected. Right now, the pieces are still moving. Momentum is still building, but the early signals are already appearing. Chosen one, remember this. A surprise does not always arrive suddenly. Sometimes it begins quietly, like a train that starts moving slowly before it gathers speed. At first, the movement is almost invisible, but once it gains momentum, it becomes impossible to stop. Your life may be entering that stage now. The movement has already started, and if you remain attentive today, you may notice the signal that confirms it. When that signal appears, trust the clarity that follows, because the moment you recognize what is already unfolding is the moment your next chapter truly begins. Chosen one. There is a deeper reason this shift in your life began exactly now and not months ago, not years ago, and not at some distant point in the future. Timing is rarely random. Many people believe that opportunities appear purely by chance, that life simply throws moments at them unpredictably. But when you look carefully at the turning points in your own life, you will notice something different. Important moments tend to appear when you are internally ready for them. Readiness does not always feel like confidence. Sometimes readiness feels like exhaustion. Sometimes it feels like a quiet moment where you realize you cannot continue repeating the same patterns forever. Think about the journey that brought you to this point. There were seasons when you tried extremely hard to make something work. Relationships, goals, projects, ideas. You invested time, energy, patience, and hope into things that seemed promising at the time. Some of those efforts succeeded, others did not. And the ones that did not succeed may have left you with questions. You might have wondered whether you misjudged the situation, or whether the timing simply was not right. But those experiences created something inside you that did not exist before. Perspective. Perspective changes the way you interpret opportunities when they appear again. It helps you recognize patterns earlier. It allows you to see warning signs and possibilities that you once overlooked. Chosen one. Perspective is one of the most valuable forms of preparation. Without perspective, people often rush into situations without understanding what they are stepping into. They repeat the same mistakes because they do not yet recognize the patterns. But you are not standing where you were before. You have already learned lessons that many people are still trying to understand. You have seen how quickly circumstances can change. You have experienced how fragile certain plans can be. And because of that experience, you now approach new opportunities with greater awareness. That awareness is exactly why this moment is happening now. The movement in your life began because your internal preparation reached a level where opportunity could safely appear. If the same opportunity had appeared earlier in your life, you might not have recognized its value. You might have dismissed it, misunderstood it, or pursued it for the wrong reasons. But now something has changed. Your priorities have shifted. The things that once impressed you no longer hold the same power over your decisions. You are beginning to value stability, meaning, and authenticity more than temporary excitement. Chosen one, that shift is not small. It is the difference between reacting to life and directing your life. When you reach that point, opportunities that align with your true direction begin appearing. They may not always look dramatic at first. In fact, the best opportunities often appear quietly because they are designed to fit naturally into your life rather than disrupt it completely. You may notice that certain possibilities suddenly feel more realistic than they did before. Ideas that once seemed distant now appear closer. Goals that once felt intimidating now feel achievable. This is not because the world changed overnight. It is because you changed. Your perspective adjusted, your focus sharpened, your awareness grew stronger. And when that internal change occurs, the environment around you begins responding. Chosen one, there is another important detail about this moment. When a new stage begins forming in someone's life, the mind often attempts to hold on to familiar patterns. This is natural. Familiarity feels safe, even when it is no longer beneficial. You might notice thoughts that question the movement happening around you. Maybe this is nothing. Maybe I am overthinking it. Maybe it is better to wait. Those thoughts are not unusual. They are simply the mind trying to maintain stability. But awareness allows you to observe those thoughts without letting them control your decisions. Chosen one, today may offer a moment where awareness becomes stronger than hesitation. You may notice something that triggers curiosity instead of doubt. An idea may appear that feels interesting enough to explore further. That curiosity is important. Curiosity often appears when something meaningful is approaching. It is the mind's way of encouraging exploration. Many great discoveries began with curiosity rather than certainty. Chosen one, you do not need to understand everything immediately. You only need to recognize when something deserves your attention. Attention is powerful. Where you place your attention determines what grows in your life. If you constantly focus on distractions, distractions will multiply. If you focus on possibilities, possibilities begin expanding. Today may present a moment where your attention shifts towards something that carries real potential. That moment may feel simple, but simple moments often carry hidden significance. A message might appear that reconnects you with someone whose perspective could influence your next step. A piece of information might surface that answers a question you did not know how to solve. An idea might return to your mind with new clarity. When that happens, pause long enough to observe it. You do not need to rush into decisions. You only need to recognize that the movement has begun. Chosen one, there is something powerful about recognizing the beginning of change. Once you see the movement clearly, your actions become more intentional. You stop drifting through your days automatically. You begin observing patterns, connecting ideas, and making decisions that align with the direction you sense forming. That awareness accelerates progress. Momentum increases when awareness meets action, and once momentum grows strong enough, what once seemed uncertain becomes obvious. Chosen one, that is the stage your life may be approaching. The stage where small signals begin forming a clear direction, where opportunities that once seemed distant move closer, where the effort you invested in the past begins producing visible results. But remember something important. The beginning of a breakthrough rarely looks like a breakthrough. It often looks like a quiet moment where you suddenly realize that something is different. A realization, a connection, a small opportunity that feels meaningful. That is why this message tells you to check carefully before noon. Because the sign you notice today may not feel dramatic in the moment, but later
you may look back and realize something surprising. The turning point you thought would arrive someday in the future actually began with a quiet moment you almost overlooked. And that quiet moment may be happening sooner than you expect. Chosen one. There is a moment that appears in many people's lives, a moment so subtle that most individuals overlook it completely. It is not loud, it is not dramatic, and it rarely looks like the turning point it truly is. This moment often arrives disguised as something ordinary: a small decision, a brief conversation, a message that seems routine. But hidden inside that ordinary moment is a shift. The reason so many people miss this moment is because they expect transformation to arrive with certainty. They believe that when something important is about to happen, the signs will be obvious and impossible to misunderstand.
But real life does not work that way.
Often the moment that changes everything feels almost insignificant at first.
Think about the stories of people who experienced major turning points in their lives. Many of them describe a simple beginning, a casual meeting with someone they had never expected to encounter, a small opportunity that seemed minor compared to their larger goals, a single idea that appeared unexpectedly during an ordinary day. At the time, those moments did not seem extraordinary. Only later did they realize that everything began there. Chosen one. Today may hold a moment like that for you. And the reason this moment matters so much is because your life has quietly been preparing for it. Preparation often happens without visible results. You worked, learned, struggled, adapted, and continued moving forward through seasons when nothing seemed to change. You carried responsibilities when it would have been easier to stop caring. All of that effort created a foundation. Now that foundation is ready to support something new. But before the larger change appears, there is usually a small signal, a moment that tests your awareness. This signal is rarely obvious. It might appear as a message that reconnects you with someone you had not spoken to in a long time. It might appear as information that suddenly answers a question you've been asking yourself for months. Sometimes the signal appears internally. You may suddenly feel drawn to an idea you once abandoned. A thought may return to your mind repeatedly, asking for your attention. Many people dismiss these moments. They assume the thought is random. They assume the message is insignificant. They assume the opportunity will appear again later if it truly matters. But the truth is this: timing is part of opportunity. Certain moments appear at very specific times because circumstances are aligned in a unique way. If you ignore the moment completely, the same alignment may not appear again in exactly the same form. Chosen one. This does not mean you must react impulsively. It simply means you must notice. Awareness is the first step toward recognizing opportunity. When you notice something meaningful, you create the possibility of responding to it. And responding, even in a small way, can begin a chain of events that leads to larger outcomes. Many turning points begin exactly like that. A person notices something others ignore. They explore it briefly. That exploration leads to a conversation, an idea, or an action that opens a door they never expected. Chosen one. There is something about your life right now that suggests this chain of events may be beginning. Your attention has been sharpening. You are starting to notice patterns more clearly than before. Situations that once confused you now make sense more quickly. Decisions that once felt overwhelming now feel manageable. This clarity is not accidental. It is the result of everything you have learned through experience. Experience is one of the greatest teachers life provides. It trains your instincts. It helps you recognize what truly deserves your attention. Right now, your instincts may already be sensing that something is shifting. You might feel it as curiosity. You might feel it as a subtle sense of anticipation. You might even feel it as a calm confidence that something meaningful is approaching. That feeling deserves your attention. Chosen one. The reason the message says to check before noon is not about a specific clock on the wall. It is about awareness during the early part of your day. Morning hours often carry clarity because your mind is less crowded with distractions. You are more likely to notice subtle signals when your attention is calm. During that time, something may cross your path that resonates with you. It may be a message you read differently than you normally would. It may be an idea that suddenly feels worth exploring. The moment may pass quickly, but if you pause long enough to recognize it, you may realize something important. The movement in your life did not begin today. It began earlier, quietly, gradually, behind the scenes. Today may simply be the moment when you finally notice it. Chosen one, there is a powerful difference between waiting for change and recognizing change that has already begun. When people wait for change, they often remain passive. They assume life will eventually present them with something obvious. But when people recognize change, their behavior shifts. They begin observing more carefully. They start asking better questions. They become curious about possibilities they once ignored. Recognition transforms awareness into action, and action transforms possibility into reality. Chosen one, if you recognize the signal that appears today, you may discover something surprising. The opportunity you thought was still far away may actually be closer than you expected. The idea you believed was unrealistic may suddenly feel possible. The direction you once considered uncertain may become clearer. This is how momentum begins building. At first, the movement is slow. Then, awareness increases. Then, action follows. And once those three elements combine, movement, awareness, and action, progress becomes difficult to stop. Chosen one, that process may already be starting for you. But the first step is simple. Notice what appears today. Observe what captures your attention. Listen to the ideas that return to your mind, because the signal that begins your next chapter may not arrive with noise or dramatic announcements. It may arrive quietly, so quietly that only someone who is paying attention will recognize its meaning. And if you are the one who recognizes it, you may realize something powerful. The surprise you believed was still coming someday has already begun unfolding around you. Chosen one, there is something else you must understand about moments like this. When a shift begins unfolding in someone's life, the first reaction is rarely excitement. Instead, the first reaction is often doubt. Doubt is natural. Your mind has spent years learning to protect you from disappointment. It has seen plans fail before. It has experienced situations where hope appeared briefly and then disappeared again. Because of that history, your mind sometimes hesitates when something new begins moving toward you. It asks questions. Is this real? Am I imagining this? What if nothing actually changes? These questions are not signs of weakness. They are signs of awareness. But there is an important difference between questioning something and ignoring it completely. Chosen one, questioning can lead to clarity. Ignoring leads to missed opportunities. Right now, the movement in your life may still feel subtle enough that doubt tries to dismiss it. Your mind may attempt to treat today like any other day, but something about today may feel slightly different. Perhaps you woke up with a sense of anticipation you could not explain. Perhaps you felt an unusual calm in the middle of situations that normally create stress. Sometimes, the first signal of change is not an event. Sometimes, it is a feeling, a quiet sense that something is aligning. Chosen one, feelings alone do not change reality, but they often indicate that reality is already shifting in ways you cannot fully see yet. Your awareness is simply catching up to what has already started. Think about the moments in your life when everything suddenly made sense. Before those moments arrived, there was often a period of confusion. You were trying to understand why certain events were happening, why certain people appeared or disappeared from your life. Then one day, something clicked. The pieces connected. You suddenly realized that everything that happened earlier was leading to that moment. Chosen one, today may hold the beginning of a realization like that. You might notice a pattern forming between events that once seemed unrelated. A conversation might remind you of something you experienced weeks ago. An idea might return to your mind that now feels more possible than before. When those patterns appear, pause long enough to recognize them. Because patterns reveal direction, and direction reveals opportunity. Opportunity does not always arrive with guarantees. It often arrives with possibility. The difference between the two is simple. Guarantees remove uncertainty, but possibilities invite action. Chosen one, your next step may begin with a possibility. It might not be fully clear yet, but if the possibility keeps returning to your attention, if it continues appearing through different situations, it deserves exploration. Exploration does not mean rushing. It simply means remaining open to what might unfold. Many life-changing journeys begin with curiosity rather than certainty. Curiosity leads to exploration. Exploration leads to discovery. Discovery leads to opportunity. Chosen one, you may already be standing at the curiosity stage. Something in your life is beginning to attract your attention repeatedly. It might be an idea, a person, a path, or a project you once considered impossible. But now it feels different. It feels closer. This is not coincidence. It is the result of everything that happened before this moment. Every challenge you faced strengthened your perspective. Every lesson you learned sharpened your awareness. Every decision you made helped align your life with the direction you are moving now. Chosen one. The surprise that is already in motion did not begin today. It began earlier. You simply did not see the first steps because they were happening behind the scenes. But today may be the moment when the first visible signal appears. The signal might look simple, but the impact it carries could be much larger than you realize. And when you recognize it, something inside you will respond immediately. You will feel clarity where there was once uncertainty. You will feel confidence where there was once hesitation. Chosen one, that clarity is powerful. Clarity eliminates unnecessary doubt. It allows you to move forward with purpose instead of hesitation. And once purpose becomes clear, momentum accelerates quickly. What once felt distant begins moving closer. What once seemed complicated becomes manageable. Chosen one, that is the moment when people often realize something surprising. They realized that the opportunity they were waiting for had already begun appearing long before they noticed it. They simply needed awareness to recognize it. Today may be that moment for you. Chosen one, listen carefully, because this final moment is not about adding more mystery or stretching the story further. It is about helping you recognize something that may already be unfolding in front of you right now. The truth is, the surprise you believed was waiting somewhere in the future has already stepped into motion, quietly and patiently, while you were focused on surviving your daily responsibilities and handling the ordinary pressures of life. Many people spend years waiting for the dramatic moment when everything finally changes. But the reality is that life rarely announces turning points with noise. Instead, it allows them to begin quietly, so that only the people who are truly paying attention will recognize them when they appear. Think about your own life for a moment. The biggest shifts you experienced probably did not begin with fireworks. They began with a conversation, a realization, a decision that felt small at the time, but later you understood that everything changed from that. That point forward, that is how movement works. It begins silently, then awareness grows, then action follows. And once those three elements align, momentum becomes unstoppable. What matters most now is not forcing something to happen. It is noticing what has already started, because awareness is the doorway that turns possibility into direction.
You may still be expecting a sign that feels unmistakable, something dramatic that removes all doubt. But the first sign is often much simpler than that. It might be a message you almost ignored. It might be an idea that keeps returning to your mind. It might be a moment where you suddenly realize that a path you once thought impossible is actually standing in front of you. If that moment appears today, do not dismiss it immediately. Pause long enough to recognize how it feels, because meaningful signals usually carry a quiet clarity. They do not rush you. They do not pressure you. They simply make sense in a calm and steady way. Chosen one. The reason this moment
matters is because once recognition happens, everything changes. You stop drifting through your days without direction. You begin observing your environment differently. You start connecting patterns that once seemed been carrying for months. Perhaps it will simply be the realization that the direction of your life can change from this point forward, whatever form it takes. The key is recognition, because once you recognize movement, you stop waiting for life to begin. You realize it has already begun. And that realization shifts your energy, your focus, and your decisions. Chosen one, remember this. The biggest turning points in life often look ordinary at the beginning. The only difference between the people who experience transformation and the people who miss it is awareness. One group notices the moment and follows the direction it reveals. The other group ignores it because it seems too simple. Today might look like any other day, but sometimes the most important days in your life begin exactly like this. Quietly, without announcement, without drama, just a moment where something catches your attention, and later, you realize that moment was the beginning of everything that followed. So slow down, just enough to notice what appears in front of you today. Observe the thoughts that return to your mind. Listen carefully to the conversations happening around you, because the signal you recognize today might reveal something you did not expect. The surprise you believed was still coming someday was already in motion. All obvious had happened. Yet the way certain conversations seemed to point toward the same ideas, the way certain thoughts returned to your mind again and again, even when you tried to ignore them. These are not random patterns. They are signals that momentum has already started forming around you. And momentum is one of the most powerful forces that exists. Because once it begins, it continues pulling events together until something new becomes visible. The reason many people miss this stage is because they assume change should feel dramatic. But the earliest stage of change actually feels quiet, almost ordinary. You might still be following your daily routine. You might still be handling the same responsibilities you handled yesterday, but inside that ordinary rhythm, something has already begun adjusting the direction of your life. And the reason this matters is because awareness during this stage determines how quickly the shift becomes real. If you ignore the signals, the movement continues slowly in the background. But when you notice the signals, lives missing these moments. Simply because they expect transformation to appear loudly, they scroll past opportunities because they look ordinary. They dismiss ideas because they appear simple. They ignore signals because they assume the real moment will arrive later. But what they fail to realize is that the real moment often begins quietly, long before it becomes obvious. And the people who recognize it early are the ones who step into the next stage first. Right now, you may be approaching that stage, the point where everything that has been building quietly begins revealing itself through small confirmations. Maybe a message appears that reconnects you with a possibility you once considered impossible. Maybe someone says something that suddenly makes sense of a situation you have been trying to understand. Maybe an idea returns to your mind with a clarity you did not have before. Whatever form it takes, the important thing is not the size of the moment.
It is the awareness you bring to it. Because awareness is what transforms ordinary moments into turning points. Chosen one. Remember that the biggest changes in life often begin with the smallest signals. The difference between people who experience transformation and people who continue waiting is simply recognition. One group notices the moment and follows the direction it reveals. The other group dismisses the moment because it seems too simple, and by the time they realize what it meant, the opportunity has already moved forward without them. Today might look like an ordinary day, but the quiet movement that began earlier may already be reaching the point where you can see it clearly. If you pause long enough to notice what crosses your path, you might recognize something important. The surprise you believed was still coming toward you was never waiting in the distance. It was already moving, step by step, through conversations, thoughts, decisions, and circumstances that slowly aligned around your life. And the moment you recognize that alignment is the moment you understand something powerful, you were never simply waiting for the next chapter to begin. You were already standing at the beginning of it without realizing it. And now, that awareness has arrived. The direction in front of you may become clearer, faster than you expect, because the shift that once felt invisible is no longer hidden. It has already begun unfolding around you. Chosen one. Before this message truly ends, there is one final truth you need to hear, and it is simpler than you might expect. The reason this moment matters so much is not because something dramatic suddenly appears in front of you, but because awareness has finally caught up with movement. The shift you were waiting for was never meant to arrive like a sudden storm. It was meant to unfold quietly, so that only someone who has learned patience, awareness, and perspective could recognize it when it began. And that is exactly where you are standing now. You may still look around and see the same surroundings, the same responsibilities, the same routine that existed yesterday, but something inside you understands that the direction of your life is no longer exactly the same as it was before. Because recognition changes everything. Once you recognize movement, you stop living as if nothing is happening. You begin observing your days with intention. You start listening more carefully to your own instincts. You notice which opportunities deserve your attention and which distractions deserve to be ignored. And that awareness becomes the force that turns quiet momentum into visible progress. Chosen one. Many people wait their entire lives for the perfect moment when they feel completely certain before they take action. But the people who step into their next chapter are not the ones who wait for certainty. They are the ones who recognize movement early and allow their awareness to guide the next step, even if the full path is not yet visible. That is why this message kept reminding you to check before noon. Not because a miracle suddenly falls from the sky, but because sometimes the signal that confirms everything appears in a moment so ordinary that most people would overlook it completely. A message that reconnects you with a possibility, a thought that suddenly feels important, a conversation that reveals information you needed to hear. Whatever form that signal takes, the power of the moment comes from recognition. Because the instant you recognize that something has already begun unfolding, your perspective shifts. And when perspective shifts, your decisions follow. And when your decisions follow, the quiet movement that began behind the scenes becomes something real, something visible, something that changes the direction of everything that comes next. Chosen one, remember this. The greatest turning points in life rarely begin with loud announcements. They begin with awareness. They begin with a moment when you realize that the life you thought was still waiting somewhere in the future
has already started forming around you, piece by piece, conversation by conversation, realization by realization. And now that awareness has reached you, the only question that remains is whether you will recognize the moment for what it truly is. Because the surprise you believed was still coming toward you has never been standing far away. It has been moving quietly through your life the entire time. And the moment you understand that truth is the moment your next chapter stops being something you hope for and becomes something you are already living right now.